exploded at Baltimore Ravens joint practice with the Indianapolis Colts. We talk about what happened, key players stepping up, and so much more coming up on this instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day are free and available for you on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and in audio form where you can follow along and subscribe as well. We're 5 days a week here on Locked On Ravens, Monday through Fridays, our regularly scheduled content at 6 a.m. Eastern time. But we also go live for instant reactions to big news like this. The Ravens wrapping up their joint practice with the Colts here on Tuesday. We also go live after every single Ravens game. And we also have the Locked On Ravens Squad Show, which is live Mondays and Thursdays, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time with myself, former Ravens receiver Kadri Ismail, as well as Sam and Joke. We had Ravens long snapper Nick Moore on the show last night, so that was really exciting. Nick was awesome and gave a lot of awesome insight. Joint practice is over for the Ravens, and there's a lot to take away and a lot to dive into. Obviously, the news of the day probably was the brawl that happened, Nate Wiggins being the main culprit in that one. So we'll dive into that in the first part of the show and kind of talk about the mentality the team has this season. We'll also dive into key takeaways. Some players stepped up, some guys that need to step up in the wake of some injuries, so that was good to see. Then just joint practice takeaways in general, and we'll be back here tomorrow with I think Q is going to join us, Kadri Ismail, and he's going to give his thoughts on what he saw out at practice, at joint practice. So we'll get his takeaways from his eyes, which I think is going to be really, really exciting. So this is the instant reaction episode to that. And Johnny, I know I was late. I was a couple minutes late to the live. I've been working with this is the new mic. We're doing the new setup. I got the green screen because I'm doing the background. It's just a white background behind me. It's just a wall. But I couldn't figure out, the mic was not connecting. And I'm like, we need to connect the mic. And so we finally got it working. I think I sound crisper, a little better than I did. So investing in that has been really awesome. So we also, Abdi's in the chat. I see, hey, we even got a Colt. I think this is a Colts fan in here. And we welcome all fans, Ravens, Colts. I think what I took away is that it was definitely mixed results, right? I think that's probably going to be the headline for tomorrow, especially as more takeaways continue to come out. I think, at least based off what we're seeing here, the Ravens won some periods, the Colts won some periods. I don't think one team dominated the other. I think certain players dominated on both sides, right? I know Adonai Mitchell, AD Mitchell, he apparently played really well for the Colts. Anthony Richardson had some throws, and on the Ravens side, we'll get into some of those guys at the tight end position being one of the main ones there. So, yeah, we'll dive into all of that. And no, Andrew, there is not a joint practice tomorrow. They only did one day, so I don't know. I don't actually know if the Ravens have the day off or if they're just doing a regular light walkthrough or practice tomorrow. But there was only one day of the joint practices. Pat Ricard kind of talked about how when there are 2 days, it really increases the likelihood for a fight, and look at what good that did. It's the Ravens and Colts fought anyway, but Patrick Ricard talked about how it's kind of hard to avoid those things. And Johnny, I'm glad I sound a little better than I did before the mic change. Every improvement is a good one here, and I'm excited to continue to get the background going. But let's talk about the fight. That's the big storyline. Tempers exploded at Ravens training camp with the Colts, the joint practice, and to be honest, it's not something that I wasn't expecting. I expected to see some headline about it, but apparently there was a little bit of a scuffle during a special teams drill, right? That seemed to be when it happened. And John Harbaugh actually commented on it and said, man, it always happens. It's always special teams. It's always special teams. So it was Ravens backup quarterback Keon Martin. He delivered a late push on a Colts player, and so that Colts player ended up retaliating, and apparently Nate Wiggins just burst off of the sideline, and according to Jameson Hensley, delivered several uppercuts. So Nate Wiggins was standing on business. Nate Wiggins does not play around. We know that. Nasty Nate is the nickname. Nate doesn't really like it, but it's that Nasty Nate is the nickname. Nate stands on business. We know that. We know he's a fiery player. I think, when the Ravens bring in a guy like Jair Alexander, and you already have Marlon Humphrey and Nate Wiggins there. Like, all three of those guys have attitudes, and I think it's in a good way. Like, it's the fire and the passion. Now, you never want to throw punches, right? That's something that, that's tough, right? Nate was, I guess, defending, and I'm curious to hear what Q has to say tomorrow if he pops on with me, just about from what he saw in that. But this to me is like, you want that passion and you want the energy, but John Harbaugh kind of talked about it as a learning lesson. And Derrick Henry said, you never want to fight, throw punches. And John Harbaugh said, if you throw punches, you're going to get thrown out. Like, that's what would happen. If this was a regular season game between the Colts and the Ravens and Nate Wiggins threw punches at a guy, he'd be ejected from the game. Like, that is the consequence for that. And so John Harbaugh called it a learning experience for Nate, which is, I think, a good way to make the most out of that situation. The bench is cleared after, and actually Nikhil Mehta gave a little update on the fight here, where he said that it really wasn't anything that was warranted in terms of, like, there was some shoving. I think it was Goodson, and then I believe Malachi Starks and Tavius Robinson, according to Nikhil here. But Nikhil said it was nothing to warrant coming off the sidelines, and noted that he was watching from the training room next to Isaiah Likely. So it's passion and it's energy, and that's kind of the timing the Ravens are on this season, right? I mean, that's been Lamar Jackson tweets out a couple days ago. That fact account is like one of the biggest ones on Twitter, puts out a flock of Ravens is called an unkindness, and Lamar Jackson, from now on, that's what we're on. I mean, that's the mentality here for the Ravens. They're not going to put up with anything, and it is what it is. And Abdi, I do not think they're going to show the video. I do not. If you remember a couple years ago, they had that Ravens Commanders joint practice, and there were clips and stuff, and that fight broke out with Devin Duvernay, Tylan Wallace, and that video got out there, and I don't think the Ravens were happy with that, if I'm being honest. It just feels like they weren't. So I'm not sure. I haven't even seen a clip from practice. Like, I don't think anybody was filming, right? Oh, and actually, we just got breaking news, nothing related to the Ravens, or I guess it is related to Brent Urban. George Kittle crushed it's Mike Garafolo on here, NFL Network, and said that the NFL has banned smelling salts and ammonia packets. And he said that he uses those in every drive. If you've seen the viral clip of Brent Urban doing the smelling salts, Roquan Smith, doing it, like, it's that's very potent throughout the league. So I guess that's done with. No more of that. So I guess a little miniature breaking news on an instant reaction. So we're instantly reacting to an instant reaction, which I guess is instant reactionception or something. But, back on track here. I don't think we're going to see that fight. And right, this is what I'm talking about. Like, Nate throwing uppercuts. Like, it wasn't just like a punch, like, coming in. No, he was going, like, he was throwing. If that video ever sees the light of day, I'm sure it's going to be crazy. Like, I'm sure it would be crazy, right? I don't know. So Nate is somebody, and the Ravens are a defense, and it feels like that's kind of the MO of the Ravens this season. And, Derrick Henry talked about it a little bit and said, like, he knows that the Ravens already have that competitive spirit. Like, it's already there. It's already been established. They had it last season, but the defense is playing with a little bit more of a pep in their step here. And this was a special teams draw. I'm not talking about, like, the fight in general. I'm just talking about in general with the Ravens. This is a team that I think is going to play with that swagger this season, even with Jair coming in and him having that impact. I think seriously, like, we're going to see a lot of celebrations on routine plays and like guys hyping each other up on routine things. And I know that some people find that corny. I don't personally. Like, I think, to me, there are a lot of things that can be considered corny or, like, extra, I guess is another word. But I mean, hype your guys up. Sometimes that's the difference between, I'm not going to say a win and a loss, but the difference between a guy playing well and not. Guys coming over, supporting guys. We know the Ravens have a strong bond and strong camaraderie. And I know that people are actually, all right. I'm curious about this. I'm curious about this. I've seen that people are concerned about Nate Wiggins, and I'm actually going to ask you about Nate tomorrow if he pops on with me for the regular episode of the show. Nate's been in a lot of highlight videos. All right. Yesterday, he had the Brandon Stevens special where he didn't turn his head around for the ball, which was tough. I'm not concerned about Nate personally because I don't tend to overreact either way to training camp, right? Like, I don't I don't really think that we should be putting stock like Lamar Jackson. We had Kevin Cusick on the show this morning, and he said by Lamar Jackson standards, like he hasn't lived up to those in training camp for the most part. Like he's had good days, he's had great plays, but I'm not going to put too much stock into Lamar in training camp as compared to what we see from Lamar in the regular season. He has enough of a track record. Nate obviously is less experienced than Lamar, but is anybody like, is that the vibe right now? Are people concerned about Nate? Like in the chat, if you're live with us or if you're in the comments after the fact in video form or audio form, are you concerned about Nate right now? I'm not. I mean, I think that he is someone that will turn it on during the regular season. I don't even think that, he's had that terrible of a training camp. I know it just feels like he's in every highlight video. Like it just feels like every highlight play feels like it's on Nate Wiggins, which is not true, first of all. Like it just feels that way. But I think that the trio of Nate, Jair, and Marlo, you also have Chidobe Awuzie in there. Like, I think Nate will be just fine. I think Nate will be just fine. And practice is like when the lights are bright, we know in the playoffs the Ravens like we know the storylines. I don't have to repeat them here on the show. We're all familiar. But I think that when the regular season comes around, Nate's gonna be fine. Nate's gonna be fine. And yeah, I see it. Yep, not worried. No, yep. We're talking about practice, not concerned. And I see this comment here. No, but I'm worried about the O-line. And that's an interesting one. The O-line is something that I think we should talk about. So tempers flare at practice, joint practices. Usually that always happens. There's a fight, and the Ravens have been involved in some pretty crazy joint practice fights. Not that this one was like all out like the Commanders one was a couple of years ago, but hey, Nate Wiggins I don't think I've heard an update where a guy was throwing uppercuts. So yes, Nate was kicked out of practice for that. And good learning experience, I would say, for Nate. But coming up in the second part of the show, we'll talk a little bit about the offensive line. We'll dive into some other key players that stepped up. There's a couple positional groups I think made an impact. So stay tuned. We got a lot coming up on this edition of Locked On Ravens. We're instantly reacting live to the Ravens joint practice with the Colts. This show is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. And I'm a big fantasy football player, something I do a lot, and it's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and Locked On Ravens are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. And one of my favorite features is new guillotine leagues. They just dropped, and every week the lowest scoring teams eliminated and the last one standing wins. So whether you're all in on something new or you like sticking head-to-head leagues or just jumping into public leagues, Yahoo has got you covered. And to celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, we return. It is an instant reaction live edition of the Baltimore Ravens joint practice with the Indianapolis Colts. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you. Have a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun doing lives here on Locked On Ravens. Obviously, love doing the normal show, pre-recorded Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time. But, the lives, getting involved with the community. We obviously have social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. I've been trying to do TikTok recently. I've been on there for like a week or something. I don't know how to use it, but I'm trying. So be sure to follow me over there. The YouTube community is amazing here on the show that we've built. The audio community has been amazing. Coming up on my 6-year anniversary hosting this show, which will be August 11th. So, it's been crazy. I always take credit for Lamar's MVP in 2019 because that's when I started. But we've had a lot of other great Ravens memories and other not so great Ravens memories. And Tila, I appreciate you throwing me a follow. I appreciate you. Let's now dive in to some other key updates and key players stepping up. We talked about Nate Wiggins. We talked about the fight. That was, that was the main thing. And actually, we just got another update literally right now from Nikhil Mehta, who's come on the show. He does a great job covering the Ravens and updating us on what's going on at training camp. Nikhil just gave another update. So he said that Starks and Martin were blocking Goodson, the Colts gunner, on a punt rep. And there was a little bit of shoving after the play, but Starks seemed to be walking off when Wiggins came crashing in, throwing hands. He got buried at the bottom of the pile because everybody was coming in and had to be pulled out. And fans cheered on Nate Wiggins as he walked off the field. And Nikhil said Isaiah Likely was laughing and dapping him up in the training room. But, that's what it was, a learning experience for Nate. Nikhil said, he charged on the field from the sidelines. He threw punches, you maybe risk an injury by being at the bottom of the pile. Like, that is not ideal. Right? Certainly not ideal. I'm not condoning that, especially when, apparently I can't get over he's throwing uppercuts, like just uppercuts. But that's another update on tempers erupting at Ravens training camp practice joint. And yes, Cam, it is a green screen. I'm redoing the background. I got the new mic. So it's just a white wall behind me. I'm trying to get the light. I'm trying to get a backlight behind me so that I can get like a purple backlight. And then maybe like I have this metal Raven. Maybe I'll put that up. Like I have stuff. I have to get it all organized. And I haven't had a lot of time because there's so much stuff going on. So for now, we're doing the green screen. And then that'll be what it is. So the new mic is in. We're revamping everything. And I'm excited because we also have a couple of other exciting announcements here on Locked On Ravens in the next couple of days. But other updates from joint practice. I think that, again, the phrase that I'll use is mixed results. I'll probably use that on tomorrow's show too. We'll get Q on here. Q and I are supposed to record tonight. So hopefully that all is squared away and Q can give his updates on what he saw out there at Owings Mills. But there were some things the Ravens won and there were some things that the Colts won. So the Ravens offensive line apparently early on gave Lamar a lot of time against the talented Colts front, according to Jonas Schaefer here. Lamar took a coverage sack, but then also he found Rashad Bateman wide open for a chunk. He threw across his body on that play. It was about a 15-yard completion, according to Jamison Hensley there. Apparently, according to Karita Parks, the Ravens receivers and tight ends won the one-on-one battle against the Colts DBs. But A.D. Mitchell on the Colts, he dominated in the first hour of practice. Jake Arthur over on Locked On Colts, he and Zach Hicks do a great job. Obviously, over on this network, he said that he was burning almost every DB in one-on-ones. And again, there are going to be different reports. Like this happened last year with the Packers joint practice, I remember, where the Ravens reporters and media who was out there, they were reporting one thing, and then the Packers reporters were reporting another thing, and everybody was like, well, what's going on? Like, that usually it's not uncommon to have that happen, but it seemed pretty united that A.D. Mitchell had a great day of practice. And according to Jonas, the Colts' first-string defense ended up turning the tide in the last few periods of full team, where Lamar Jackson went 2 of 7. He had an uncharacteristic drop happen by DeAndre Hopkins, and the Colts defense sniffed out some plays that Lamar Jackson had to end up throwing in the dirt, and they had a good coverage play on a deep shot to Rashad Bateman as well. But Karita Parks mentioning that there were back-to-back Tez Walker catches of at least 10 to 15 yards. So Tez showing out in a really big way. Cordell Woodland, who also does a really good job updating us on what's going on with the Ravens over at 105.7, he said that play on Bateman was from Justin Wally, a Colts defensive back. Keaton Mitchell and Rasheen Ali had a couple of nice runs throughout the day, which was nice to hear. Brian Wacker, the Baltimore Sun, said through the first few 11-on-11 periods against the Colts, Lamar was 5 of 9, but pass protection wasn't great. And that's where, Lamar was scrambling to the right, threw a cross over the middle to Bateman on that play that we're talking about. Morgan Asted said the Ravens actually won the one-on-one battles pretty easily with the Colts in the first period. Mark Andrews was solid. Dayton Wade made some plays. Anthony Miller had some plays as well. The Ravens do have some depth at wide receiver there. Are they guys that are going to contribute on a week-to-week basis for the Ravens? Probably not. But I will say that, the Ravens, that like 6th wide receiver spot is probably going to go to LeJontay Wester, right? It's probably going to go to LeJontay Wester. But they do have other depth there that makes sense. Now, apparently there was also a little mini skirmish here. Jake Arthur saying that Michael Pittman, there was a little skirmish alert. Defenders on the Ravens were persistent with their tackle attempts, and then Pittman and the offense didn't love that. And so it wasn't a fight. Jake said it wasn't a fight, but shoving and other words were had. So tempers flare, tempers explode. It happens. It happens. In 7-on-7s, according to Jamison Hensley, Lamar Jackson at Zay Flowers on a nice 10-yard out and then threw a 15-yard back shoulder pass to DeAndre Hopkins, and Lamar later overthrew Rashad Bateman on a deep pass there as well. Just Rubik at The Athletic saying that there was some good and some bad for the Ravens offense in the early red zone period, especially earlier on, and then the Colts defense and that was really the theme, it felt like, where the Ravens, at least for most of these drills and periods, felt like the Ravens offense kind of had the edge early, and then the Colts defense settled in, and then they kind of took over there. So I'd say, look, John Harbaugh talked about how it was good for everybody. Lamar talked about how it was good for everybody. They're trying to get better. Felt like both teams can take away a lot of positives here. Lamar had a touchdown to Mark Andrews in the red zone. That was the highlight play of that. Apparently, Jonas Schaefer saying here the Ravens' first-string offense scored in almost every play early in the red zone period. He got Zay Flowers on an end around, Mark Andrews that we talked about, and then Justice Hill on a screen pass. They found the end zone, but then Jonas saying that the offense fell into that rut afterwards. He had a penalty, wiped out a running touchdown, and then a blown block ruined a shot at the 4. I don't know who that blown block was on. All the comments are, it's not confirmed, but everybody is, of course, assuming it was Daniel Falele that blew the block. I don't know who it was. Again, I'm not saying it was. I have no idea who it was, but I know that people are a little concerned about Falele there. A Colts returner torched the Ravens special teams down the sideline. So, some special teams. And honestly, I can be honest about this, and I've been honest about this here on the show if you've been listening to me for a while. The Ravens special teams unit has been pretty underwhelming over the last couple of years. When it comes to kick coverage, kick returns, they haven't had juice there, and they've given up plays. It just feels like the kick coverage has not been there. The returns have been pretty underwhelming. And part of that is they haven't had a talented return, at least someone who Duvernay was great for them for a while, but he ended up not having a great year the year prior to when he left. And they haven't had a guy since Jacoby, and rest in peace to Jacoby, obviously. And they've tried, Cyrus Jones had some moments for them. They've tried with Janarian Grant. That's from the deep archives. He had a moment or two for the Ravens, but they haven't had a guy since Jacoby, right? That's a thing. And I just think that I want to see a lot more from the special teams unit this season. I'm not even talking kicker, punter, none of that. I'm just talking purely from a kick coverage perspective, both when the Ravens are defending it and when the Ravens are receiving kicks. And that was the first year of the new kickoff rules last year. So, trying to figure out who was great, who wasn't, what worked, what didn't. But even before that, it was a little bit underwhelming, right? It was a little underwhelming there. So Morgan Asset saying the Ravens red zone offense ended up being better than the Colts defense. And then Zach Hicks over at Locked On Colts said that the Colts defense had the edge over the Ravens offense in 11s and 7s. The Colts were missing a few starters. He said the red zone 7-on-7 was rough for the Ravens offense. I think more so it was like Zach was saying, we were talking about at the end, the Colts defense really buckled in, but the Ravens did have some plays early on. And then Zach actually said, as I say this, Lamar hits Charlie Kolar for a huge gain up the sideline near the end of practice. And then he ended up saying it was the Colts 6th-string cornerback, I guess, who was the target. But Charlie Kolar apparently was really good. Nikhil saying that Kolar had a great joint practice, multiple catches downfield, a few in traffic, and through contact as well. Zach over at Locked On Colts saying the Ravens offense rebounded really well at the end of practice in his eyes, with Charlie Kolar in particular. And that's huge for me. And that's something I'm going to dive into a little bit more tomorrow, is Charlie Kolar with Isaiah Likely being down. The closer week 1 gets, the less I expect the Ravens to really, I expect the Ravens to utilize Charlie Kolar a bunch with Likely down. But I know that people are talking about more 3 receiver sets or multiple receiver sets, Tez Walker getting some snaps, which I think will probably happen. But Charlie stepping into Likely's role, and I'm not saying he's going to be Isaiah Likely. I'm not saying that. But him being able to replicate some of that production, even just be some level of a threat would be huge. And the tight end group, Mark Andrews and Charlie Kolar, that's who Lamar was targeting, and they made the most of those. And then at the end of practice, the Ravens 2-minute drill apparently didn't really go anywhere. They struggled here. 2 short completions on 5 dropbacks, according to Jonas here. And the last ended with an interception from Lamar Jackson as he threw across his body over the middle of the field on a scramble. Now on the Colts 2-minute drill, they missed a 50-plus yard field goal. So, hey, if the Ravens aren't getting any points, the Colts aren't getting any points. All right, nobody's getting points. But, at the end of the day, I think that it was really, I'd say it was beneficial for both teams. Anthony Richardson actually started out joint practice running with the 1. So there's obviously a quarterback battle there between Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. I believe it was announced that Richardson will start against the Ravens on Thursday, and then Daniel Jones will get the crack at it in week 2. I believe the Colts are playing the Packers that week, if I'm not mistaken. But, we saw even, because every team, first team, second team, I believe third team, I'm not positive, but I believe third team, they got all cracks at the 2-minute drill. Cooper Rush got picked off, sacked, and fumbled on his 2-minute drill, which, yeah, that's not great. Cooper has been rough at times for the Ravens. Now ideally Cooper's not going to have to play for Baltimore this season unless the Ravens are blowing out a team by 30. Knock on wood, we get another healthy Lamar Jackson season. But, to me, if the big complaints are about a backup quarterback, that's a good training camp, right? I know the offensive line has been one thing, the penalties, that's another huge complaint, but really feels like Cooper Rush has been pretty inconsistent. So we will see there. And yep, it was Richardson week 1 against the Ravens and Jones week 2 against the Packers. Yep. Now Harbaugh actually, he made an interesting announcement. So I want to get to that in the final part of the show because it might throw everything we've been talking about the Ravens preseason out the window. It might create something new for us here. So I want to get to that as well as other practice takeaways, all that and more coming up on this instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And one goal that I've really been meaning to get serious about financially is saving. And it's been going well. Monarch's been helping me, and having everything in one app has made it really easy to manage my money on a day-to-day basis because I wish that I could just have everything in one place. All my accounts, all my spending, it's all there on Monarch. And sometimes I look at my spending and I've been surprised at how fast it adds up. So Monarch's been really helping me with that as well. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Back here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher instantly reacting with you to the Ravens joint practice with the Colts. Thank you to everybody who's tuning in today on this Tuesday, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen each and every single day. Be sure to tell a friend, tell a family member that we're here for them, just like we're here for you on Locked On Ravens. If they want daily Ravens coverage or the Ravens perspective on something, be sure to tell a friend or a family member. We've built up a great community here, started off doing audio form, moved to video a couple years later, and still have the audio community, video community, every community strong with us right now. So appreciate it. Actually started this off last year, doing instant reaction and joint practice. I did it just on a whim. I wasn't really expecting to, and I did it for the Packers one last year, and everybody loved it. It was really popular, and people liked me instantly reacting to it. So decided to get back on the saddle again this year. We'll do another one of these for the Commanders joint practice as well. And then obviously we'll be live after the Ravens preseason game on Thursday. I got a jam-packed Thursday with Ravens preseason football being back. So appreciate everybody. Let's dive into what John Harbaugh had to say about the preseason, because I've been on here preaching the fact that the Ravens are not going to play their starters in the preseason. Like, it's not going to happen, never going to happen. They have shifted from what it was 5 years ago. Particularly, I think what did the Ravens in there was J.K. Dobbins, when you had that situation, super unfortunate. And then just a couple days later, Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, or not Dobbins, excuse me, Marcus Peters, Gus Edwards and Marcus Peters, they tore their ACLs, back-to-back plays. Just I'm shuddering thinking about it. So let's move on. But I think that what that kind of said to me was, yeah, the Ravens aren't going to risk it. They will take the rust instead of the injuries, is what I think my takeaway from that was. Well, John Harbaugh ended up saying that, yes, for this Thursday, for the Colts game, they will not be playing their starters. You won't see the top guys, he said. But he said they're going to evaluate as they go and kind of take the next game as it comes for this, which is a huge shift from what I was expecting. And, in my opinion, with what this Ravens team has to offer, as you hear the siren go by, maybe. I don't know if I know my last mic picked it up. I don't know if this mic picks it up, but you might have heard the sirens going by. At the end of the day, would it be smart to play Lamar Jackson and the starters for a drive or two? Even just a drive or two. Now, we saw the Ravens try to do that, and that's what happened with JK, right? The Ravens tried to just get a couple of snaps in with their starters, and, the most catastrophic outcome happened. Maybe the Ravens have healed enough since that moment to maybe try it out. I don't know. And just because Harbaugh says this does not mean that they are going to play. Now, Kieran mentions it here. What about the potential of a slow start with the early big games that we have? It's a realistic, whether it's a worry or a conversation point. It is a realistic conversation to have because we know that the Ravens, five of their first 6 games are against division winners from last season. You obviously have that huge Bills game in week 1. You got the Lions, the Chiefs, the Rams. Like you have a lot of really good opponents. So is there an argument for them to play their guys for a drive? And maybe that entails guys just going, just going down, right? That was the Marquise Brown special when Marquise would catch a ball, Hollywood would catch a ball and just fall to the ground. Maybe that's what they do. Where they play their guys for a drive. And when you catch that football or you have that ball and there's a guy, you just dive. You just go down. I don't know how that's going to work. I do think it's beneficial personally. Like I would play the starters. I don't know if my prediction is still they don't. Maybe they prove me wrong. I don't know. We'll see. We'll react to it if it happens. I would still say play. And honestly, let's do another quick poll / game in the chat. If you're live with us, would you play the starters at all this preseason? Let's say you're John Harbaugh. You can make that call. Would you play the starters in the preseason at all? Or would you let them sit back, relax, and you'll take some of the rest if you can avoid any potential injury? I'm actually very curious to hear what everybody else thinks. I personally would, but if you don't want that, I completely understand it. Like I get both sides of the story. I get it. But I just think it is beneficial to have some reps. And not every team doesn't play their starters. Like we see teams play their guys sometimes because, back when the Ravens, and it was 4 preseason games, you would see the starters play for maybe like half of quarter 1 in the first game, a quarter in the second game, a half in the third game, and then they'd sit out the last one. I personally liked that. Now, again, that does open you up to the risk of injury, but I do think it helps guys get chemistry together on the field. And that's why joint practices have become so important, right? Especially for the starters, is because for the Ravens, the starters aren't seeing live action against different teams. That's why joint practices have been important, because that really is the most live action those guys get. So I'm not saying that's wrong or it's the wrong approach. Like, again, I understand it from either perspective. And I see in the chat, multiple people are saying play the starters for a drive or 2. Multiple people are saying sit them. Like there is a realistic and legitimate argument for both sides, but I do think the experience is worth it, right? But you want to have it be as close to a game situation as possible. Like you want to have guys go all out in the preseason, but with that does come an even increased risk of an injury. So maybe it's a strategic of you play certain guys but not other guys. Maybe Lamar doesn't play or Derrick Henry doesn't play, but I don't know who would be an example. Maybe Bateman gets a series. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like the biggest younger star or good player that would play a series. Would it be Zay? I mean, I think that Falele should play. All right. I think that Voorhees should play, right? Those guys should play. Maybe the offensive line gets a drive together, right? Maybe the offensive line gets a drive together. I don't know. And I see Cam officially announcing that Lamar Jackson's banned from preseason. So I guess that's what we're announcing here on the show is Lamar's banned from preseason. That's what's going on here. I don't blame you. Yeah, Kieran, I would say maybe Rosengarten for a drive or 2. Maybe for a drive or 2. But, when you have important games like the Bills one, there is that argument to be made. So it's interesting. It is interesting. But I think the vibes also are just high with the team right now. Obviously the Ravens, they have that competitive spirit. There was a question to Jair Alexander or two. All right, let me reset that scene. There was a question from Jair Alexander to Nnamdi Madubuike. There we go. That was a little harder than I thought it was going to be getting that out. But there was a question. Jair Alexander asked a question to Nnamdi Madubuike. They were just joking around, and they ended up talking about how the joint practice, Nnamdi asked Jair for an autograph, and he has it in his locker. And you could just tell, like, Nnamdi was having fun with it. Jair was having fun with it. Like, I think that, for me, he has increased the vibes. And not that the vibes were bad. The vibes were good before Jair got there. Like, you could tell, like, the vibes were there. But everybody who talks about Jair, players, coaches, Like they all say he brings that energy. And I think the funniest answer still to me was Jair, when asked about Marlon, was like, I thought I was weird. So just having the Jair and Marlon combination, I won't say the nickname. It's the first time I'm not going to say it. But I think that combination is going to do wonders for them this season. Also, Lamar Jackson, quickly here, I want to make this note. He said that he actually feels like he felt his rookie season from a speed and mobility perspective. So that's like skinny Lamar, right? Skinny Lamar. That was before Lamar had a full NFL offseason, and he mentioned the fact that he got a little bulky, tried to put on the weight, didn't work. He wanted to take that weight off. So as long as Lamar feels good with his weights, I know that some people, if he's not as bulky, he exposes himself to injury. I'm not really on that train. Like, I think if an injury would happen, it would happen. Like, I guess if he gets hit by a bigger defender, having more bulk on him would be fine, but then you're not getting vintage Lamar. So I'd rather have vintage Lamar. Lamar, since his rookie season, has got very smart with his body. I have no worries about that. He doesn't take unnecessary hits anymore like he did his rookie season. So I'm all good with Lamar feeling like he did his rookie season. I think that's actually a really, really positive development. That's all I have for you here today, though, on this live edition of Locked On Ravens. This was awesome. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in. We'll be back here tomorrow. Kaji Ismail, former Ravens receiver. He should be with us. He should be with us. So we'll get his perspective on what he saw at OTAs, or not OTAs, at the Ravens. We're far past OTAs. At the Ravens joint practice with the Colts. Man, I'm back in June. I'm back in July. Jeez. All right. We're at joint practices. Q will be with us hopefully tomorrow, diving into what he saw. So on the way out, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along in audio form for 5 days a week of Daily Ravens coverage plus more. And I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.